No,
Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, Mike Leno, and Evan Ginsberg. Hey, guys, so we have a lot to talk about today. One of the main things that I do want to talk about is a full-on breakdown of the movie Iron Claw, which I finally had a chance to see, and you sort of have had a chance to see, Mike. I know you haven't watched the entire thing all the way through, but
Russ for his help on that. Russ, before we get into that, can we, before we lose that train of thought, discuss the Academy Awards? And I know Russ isn't a big fan, so maybe
until I'm getting one, until they award one to me, I'm not interested. That's the only.
Well, do they have? Wait, do they have annual awards for attorneys and other?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. But most people don't.
It's the bar. And instead of an award, you get to drink from the bar. But Ev, we were just talking about Jimmy Kimmel, and let you open with what you thought. You don't think well, certainly there is no Johnny Carson, nobody replacing that guy. Letterman came close, but he was different. He was acerbic and snotty. But what were your thoughts on some of these late night hosts?
I'm not a huge fan of any of them today. I don't think any of them touched Carson or Letterman or Steve Allen or pretty much any of the originators. I just think they were sharper and it was less vanilla, just plugging stuff.
That's the way.
I think the line was at Jay Leno. I think the line of demarcation is Jay Leno. Once Jay Leno took over, the late night talk show scene was never quite the same.
Evan was kind enough, one of those times I came back to my second home in New York, which I love so much. We went to Conan taping. We saw Louis Belzer, the drummer, right, Ev?
Yeah.
Remember that? And we talked a bit I got Andy Richter to come over. We didn't even know, or we sort of had an inkling he loved pro wrestling, and he talked to us a little about that. But Conan was pretty good, but he was unique.
Conan was funny. I mean, he was just plain funny and irreverent. And I enjoyed Conan for the most part when he was crying about losing his slot, and the guy was clocking $40 million a year or whatnot. I didn't think it was the biggest tragedy to ever hit mankind. But
that tells you what F was at times, and I enjoyed Jay Leno. Loved his, the clippings that he kind of stole from David Letterman. But the more of that, the better. No one's doing those now, where they're effed up advertisements or crazy stuff that the newspaper had misspellings. But Leno F's over Letterman for the Tonight Show, and then he F's over Conan. So there's a lot of fodder there, and I don't know if they've done a movie on that book, The Late Night Wars.
Yeah, no, they did. That's been a television series. They made that into a TV series. So yeah, it's definitely been chronicled.
I'm just personal opinion. I like Kimmel because he really goes after Trump, and he does it in a funny way. And because Trump is such a bully, and he's really a coward. Because if you were to call him a fat fuck to his face, he'd back off, or whatever. You were in a debate with him, like Hillary should have said,
He'd sue you.
"What are you doing, perv? Getting right near me." So he's a coward, but he makes up these names because he's sort of insulated. The Teflon Don, all the. Like when he was president, it was like every other day he was doing something that should have gotten him in jail or kicked out of office. But Kimmel goes after him in a funny way, and he prefaces it every time. Like Miralardo, he calls him by a name. Give it back to this fuckwad. And I'm sorry I'm using curse words, but Colbert really goes into it, but sometimes it's not funny. He's a super intelligent guy. And you know who was intelligent late night host? I'll go back. Virginia Graham. I liked her. She was a daytimer. I like Burt Griffin. I like Mike Douglas a lot.
Stewart.
Jon Stewart. Well, there's nobody touching him for the current guys. He's the godfather now that Letterman's Letterman's producing a good show. I think people should watch. Evan, I think both, maybe all three of us love Sarah Silverman, but she's doing Stupid Petrix, which is a Letterman bit. Letterman's producing the show. I really like it. It's Monday nights on TBS, and it repeats throughout the week, so you don't have to worry about missing it.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
She's entertaining. Chelsea Handler was totally unique, not like anybody else. She was a great late night host, I thought, on her E! show. But and Seth Meyers is good. But I think you could take all the late night guys, even my favorite Kimmel, lump them all together, and they couldn't lace Carson's shoes nor hold his jockstrap. So I'll throw it back to you guys. But Kimmel is, you give him a chance, but last night was not his best. But that line about Trump and it's past, I thought he was past his jail time, was effing great. And I loved I don't know why that song, I'm Just Ken, that should have won. That had the place rocking and rolling. Everybody was standing on their feet. Slash came out. Even people didn't know that Eddie Van Halen's son, Wolfgang, also played guitar last night on the Academy Awards for that I'm Not Ken. That was an amazing moment, but the rest of the show was boring. It was all the bomb movie for the most part, getting all the awards. And man, was I pissed that the Native American woman did not win. I mean, Emma Stone, great actress, great in the movie. I saw it, I loved it, but she already won an Academy Award for La La Land, and so the Native American woman who had won everything leading up to that, she got screwed over. I was pissed. Evan, what did you think? And Russ, if you watched some clips, what did you guys think?
I root for the underdogs, and I like when the indie filmmakers, win best animation or best documentary, and they've worked tirelessly and they haven't made any real money, and yeah, you don't need a major movie stars winning their second and third Academy Awards or whatnot. It's give somebody else.
Like the fact that the wrestler didn't win an Academy Award is a complete robber.
We're pissed. Ev, did you legit hear that anybody was upset? I'm talking legit upset, not just wrestling fans, but anybody in the industry, film and TV, were upset that Iron Claw wasn't nominated or the actors weren't nominated.
I didn't think it was good enough to be nominated myself. I mean,
it's good. It certainly worth everybody's time. I really enjoyed it. I'm a
since we're talking about that, maybe we should jump into that because
sure, perfect segue.
Yeah, I saw Iron Claw a couple of months ago, and I thought I didn't have the whole issue. Oh, the guy didn't look like Flair, and he came off as cartoonish. My issue was the central plot point, the relationship between Kevin and Fritz, was never resolved. Late in the movie, Fritz says to him, if you sell the business to Jared or whatnot, where you're not welcome in my home anymore, and then just left that hanging. Wasn't the whole point the relationship with the father and the sons, and him driving them past the point of human endurance where they all imploded except Kevin, and so. At the end of the movie, you don't know. Did they resolve things? Did they not resolve things? How do you leave that hanging? I don't get it.
Let me just say something quick, and then I think Russ deserves some time. Kevin and his two sons said that the filmmakers never came to them while the movie was being done or pre-production to ask them or go over biographic facts. So you have the actual source, Kevin, there. Because Dorothy, there's Doris. I only knew her as Doris. I never heard Fritz. I was in their home twice. I'll get into that later. I never heard him call her Dottie, but maybe that's legit. But if the filmmakers were going off of hearsay or maybe stuff that other people wrote instead of going right to the only living source left, Kevin Von Erich, Kevin Atkinson, that is where a lot of these fallacies came in. Like, for example, in Air, I'm watching. Fritz Von Erich left the NWA for a variety of reasons, although he was able to get the NWA champs like Harley and Flair to come in a lot. But during the time when they're still Kevin's not, Kerry hasn't even started wrestling. They have the logo of World Class Championship Wrestling on the ring. That didn't occur until well after, years later. So there are a lot of factual and time errors in this.
I didn't have as much issues with the facts that were wrong and the timeline that was wrong. As I was sitting there, the whole movie, I just kept going, that doesn't look like Kerry Von Erich. That doesn't look like Kevin Von Erich. The only one that looked like the Von Erich was Fritz. So you're kind of sitting there. It was kind of like when Will Smith played Ali, and you go, "That's Will Smith." That looks.
I totally agree with you, Evan.
That threw me off. But the average person is not a lifetime wrestling fan. The average person watching it doesn't really know what they look like, so they're watching it as a movie, you know.
But Kerry's body belonged on Kevin's body, and
vice versa. Yeah,
and vice versa. And I think some of that is because this movie was kind of the world according to Kevin. You know, he's the only one that's alive, so the only one they could get any, you know, input on about what happened is Kevin.
But they didn't go to him, and that's why you have a lot of these errors that matter to people that were around, whether it's Meltzer on down to whomever, or any of us that came home and watched World Class on ESPN, who might have missed it when they originally aired, because they would air, I wouldn't call it episode 1, but they would air late 70s, maybe 78, 79, and then they would go all to the present, and then they would restart and go all the way through it again, because they're airing this content 5 times a day until the AWA took the slot. But I'll say this, because like Zac Efron did not in any way look or sound like stammering Kevin Von Erich, who had a more Ron Howard, every guy next door look. But I think the essences were sort of captured, because again, these are guys that Napolitano and I, you know, came in. We were shooting, like for example, a couple of 1977 shows. So I shot about 7, 8 total times at the Sportatorium between 1975 and 78. Fritz, the only time Fritz looked like Fritz was as the earlier, you know, when Fritz was wrestling and it was the black and white at the beginning of the movie. And I'll just say this very quickly. I went to their home twice. Fritz was very nice to me, particularly at the 1977 WFIA convention. I was on the board. I won all the fan club awards for my Tolis fan club, which Evan and I are doing the book on, in 77 in Dallas. And Fritz had told me that he never said anything about him being this big football player, as the movie depicts, but he really wanted to be a dentist. And he said he went through not quite a year of Baylor University, which is a very respected dental school, and they kept telling him he just was not good with his hands. You know, his hands were way too big, maybe from whatever, because he was a big guy, but his hands were too big, and he was a little bit clumsy, and he wasn't able to carve teeth out of wax. Baylor University required you to carve all 32 teeth from the front central incisors all the way to the third molars in the back, the wisdom teeth, out of wax. That was a character builder, and he just couldn't do it. But he said he was in such good standing, he'd given some money to Baylor, he would write me a letter of recommendation. Like, he wanted me to go to Dallas. I had no desire to go. It's too far from home, where I was in California. I got accepted at Baylor thanks to Fritz Letter, but I chose, you know, my first choice stayed in California. But I saw him around his sons. I never saw him, you know, but maybe that was the private Fritz that I wasn't allowed to see, bullying them, or this favoritism, or this ranking. But Dottie, we'll just call her Dottie, but Fritz's wife had that essence, the one I met. I met Kevin's, you know, the wife in the movie that sort of pursued him initially. She had that essence. So the essences are there. No one but us historians saw this stuff may notice these things that aren't there. David Von Erich, only when he put on the black cowboy hat, looked like David Von Erich. Then it was perfect. You know, you can kind of hide the wigs with a hat, and they should have put hat. Well, I don't know. I mean, but you have Zac Efron as Kevin. You have that guy from The Bear, that great TV show on FX, who was playing. He was playing Carrie. who didn't look like him. But the voices weren't there. Bill Mercer did not look and sound. I was telling Russ this. Bill Mercer did not look and sound like Bill Mercer. He stammered at times. He would screw things up a little. But that's what we loved about Bill Mercer. He was a real, non-varnished, a real wrestling announcer. Because look at most of the guys in that, they were not the epitome, the Walter Cronkite and Gordon Solie. So where was Mark Lawrence? Didn't see him in there. I didn't see the refs being called by name like David Manning and James Beard, friends of mine to this day. Let me shut up and throw back to you guys. But I think the movie's worth seeing by everybody. Some of the faults, let's put them aside. It's enjoyable. I like the quiet moments where the boys early on, or on those little raft things, those inner tubes floating around in the water. There were some really nice moments in the film.
It was relentlessly grim, and being a wrestling fan / journalist, whatnot, you knew it was like waiting for the Titanic to sink in Titanic. Oh. So, that alone made it a hard watch. But my initial point was, did or didn't Kevin and Fritz resolve, their differences? And I think that's central to the story. How do you just leave that like that? It's like, okay, so
don't you think they should have gone to Kevin and asked him these questions to make it factually accurate?
Of course, but I just mean dramatically. It's kind of just putting the two words "the end" without knowing the end, and their spin was Kevin ended up happily married with a loving family, and that's the happy spin. Then they showed the scene in heaven, but Mike wasn't there, right? Mike?
Yeah, and let me talk about the one elephant that's in the room about the Von Erich family, and that's that they left out Chris, and the story.
I heard from the producer. He said he morphed. It had been too much and made the movie too long to have a Chris and Mike, so they morphed the two brothers into just the one Mike, even though there were five.
Yeah. I meant to say Chris wasn't there. I saw the movie a few months ago. So they have this scene in this poignant scene in heaven where all the brothers reunite, but the one brother isn't there because he was working an indie show in heaven.
Yeah, that's really funny. But
he gets his payday.
He had an indie payday. He couldn't show up for the reunion. So,
but yeah, to whitewash Chris entirely out of it, it's just it's wrong. I mean, it's wrong to make a biography about a family and then leave one of the family members out of it and pretend he never existed. That's not kosher.
The filmmakers said it would have been too grim and repetitive, but it was relentlessly grim and repetitive.
Yeah,
so it would have been
what happened if you're gonna.
It would have been super relentlessly grim and repetitive.
But they have one more brother. You have the obligation to tell the whole story. I mean, if you're gonna tell their story, you have that obligation to tell the whole story. I wouldn't want them to tell my story and mention my daughter and not mention my son. And say, well, we just didn't have time to talk about your son. So you don't have twins now. You just have a son, or you just have a daughter, and we'll just do it that way.
They left out in this movie. They left out Buddy Sotelo, Continental Nobleman Joe Turco. They left out everybody.
They did,
and including one of the brothers.
Watching World Class.
But the referee thing, because those refs were so integral. They sat in on booking meetings. I'm talking James Beard, David Manning, and some of the other ones. You can't fit
everything into an hour 45 movie. That I kind of understood.
Yeah, it just and you know what else is for the public.
Evan, you do what modern Evan.
Hold on, we were hammered like every year and a half. You'd hear of another guy die in that family, starting with David with the alleged OD in Japan. That was what we were all told, and I talked to the people there that night. But so to compress those deaths, here they're only dealing with 4 instead of the legit 5, if you don't count the 6th one that died when Kevin was 4. it just would hammer you every year and a half or approximately thereafter. Somebody's dying or taking their own life, and then just horrific with Carrie with the rifle, and so to compress all of that makes it exactly as Evan described it, laborious and unrelentingly depressing. But we had those other moments, like Evan and I think we're at the same show. I'm shooting at the Coraluzzo show, and he brings in Carrie after he left, not long after he left as Texas Tornado in the WWF, and he has Nancy Sullivan, his woman, managing. How crazy, insane was that? But it was great, managing Carrie Von Erich on a Coraluzzo indie with Eddie Gilbert against Dutch Mantel and others. Do you remember that Coraluzzo show where Carrie was
saw Carrie Von Erich on a Joel Goodhart show.
Yeah, he was on Joel, and he was also on John Clark, the Flyers show too.
But what I was going to say, Evan, is that you say you can only fit that in an hour and 45 minutes. Well, do what all directors are doing these days. Just make it a 2 hour and 45-minute movie. That's what they do now. Is that to fit stories in, they just make the movie run forever.
Yeah, I agree. You could have made it. Did
you see The Flower Moon? Did you see
Not yet.
Flower Moon? I mean, that's a movie that
very long. The Atom Bomb movie.
No spoilers. I didn't see it.
Yeah, or Oppenheimer, same kind of thing.
You guys, and maybe Russ knows this. What else have these guys done before? Was this their initial film effort? If we could give them a pass, if this is their very first effort, they say a documentary. Not a documentary,
it's not
but
really a documentary. Yeah,
docudrama.
Yeah, docudrama. So, have they done anything before, Russ? Do you know?
No, not that I know of. So, I do think it's not from any kind of major.
These were veteran filmmakers. I don't know their resume, but filmography, say. But I thought the scene that was really powerful was after Carrie died and Kevin tried to strangle Fritz, and he carried the body into the house. It was devastating. And I enjoyed the scenes where they were interacting. The brothers were interacting and roughhousing, and you saw them as a family. But it was just one tragedy after another. It's not a happy watch by any means. And
I thought a really interesting part of the film was when Carrie wins the NWA title from Ric Flair. And one, you don't see any ring action at all from it. It's all like either people listening to it or watching it on a tiny little black and white television set. And considering what a major part of the whole Von Erich family was, that that someone wins the NWA title. In the movie, it's incredibly understated as far as like an actual event. That for all the buildup and all of that, what that meant for the Von Erich family to win an NWA title, it really was kind of an empty thing. Even though Texas Stadium went completely nuts when it happened.
I didn't think the ring action was that great in the movie. It was pedestrian.
Hey, Fritz was the first guy that told me, if you want to hear, you listen. That wrestlers for decades and decades, going back to the 30s, would listen. They didn't have to go look at what was happening, and so this isn't an excuse. But they didn't. They would listen. And Bubba Ray Dudley says this to this day. Is if he wants to check and see if the face of the heel are over or what's going on with the match, he just listens to the crowd. He doesn't pull back the curtain, in Gorilla to look. So that is a truism, because that was the first time I heard that, and that was 77, right from Fritz's mouth. That's how I tell how the match is going or how the boys are doing, is I listen. I don't look. I don't have to look. I listen. And if you listen to the crowd, and Russ, maybe you got that in wrestling training from, I don't know who was training, if it was still Ricky Thompson, or Robert Thompson rather, or Mayock the Magician, Watkins, and Vinny Massaro, and some of those guys. But that was true for them as well. That's a long timer thing, is listen to the crowd. So maybe they hit upon that by accident, or maybe that was by intent, but that did capture a Fritzism. Listen, you don't always have to look.
I think it was more like, you know, a statement that NWA title wasn't, despite it being such a huge goal for the Von Erich family, wasn't as meaningful as they really thought it would be, considering the price that title actually they all had to pay, that family had to pay to achieve it, you know.
But the problem, sleaziness of billing it that way and trying to capitalize on these deaths, and the Fritz heart attack angle that was in such poor taste, but capitalizing on you know, like David's death. You know, there's a fine line between doing that, and then again, the world class, Fritz pulls away from the NWA. That's when World Class Championship was born. That name and that promotion as a outlaw, unrelated no longer to the NWA. When Flair was coming in, obviously they were fully part of the NWA, but Fritz pulled away. That movie kind of blew it on those levels, but I still recommend it. It's still worth seeing. Many flaws and all.
Evan, what's your thought about that NWA, the title match with Ric Flair?
But let's overall, even with these flaws and the depressing things, because how else, a movie about the Von Erichs, super accurate or not so super accurate, is going to be depressing. But for me, at least, I don't hear what you guys say. I still recommend it. I still say it's worth seeing, and younger fans that aren't in tune with all these factual things that we are might get more out of it, or at least get an education. So that's why I'm recommending.
I think the irony of it all is the non-fans would enjoy it more than the hardcore wrestling fans, because we knew every step of the way what was going to happen. And I'm sitting there going, this guy sort of looks like Brody. This guy kind of looks like the Freebird. This guy doesn't look at all like Ric Flair, you know, and you're just sitting there, and it's distracting. It's actually distracting. Again, I don't think that was the central problem. I think it was one of many problems that some of these guys just didn't look the part.
Well, they got the Freebirds visually just in the fight. The Freebirds looked pretty close. Brody, not at all Brody for me. Harley was okay, because how else are you going to capture? They sort of got Harley there. They got his robe down to the colors. Everything was right
Somebody
there.
said he used the wrong hand.
And he looked totally out of shape. I mean, Harley was in better shape back then in the early 80s. He wasn't
He
that.
had no body. That was the beauty of Harley Race. He could go an hour to an hour and a half legit, not worked. And he had really no body, sort of like a Bulldog Bob Brown, or so many guys had no bodies. You know, the only bodies we had in the 70s were Mockris, Sailor Art Thomas, Dory Dixon, and later Billy Graham.
Snuka was in great shape from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, no, he was kind of doughy when I saw him in Hawaii, you know, in footage from the late 60s and then the early 70s before he went to Oregon, and then he did a few shots in the AWA with Morocco. But we're talking 72-ish. Later on, he developed his body. Like, if you remember, if you were watching Georgia Championship Wrestling from week to week live as they happened, we saw Kevin Sullivan go from a dumpy, pasty body each week. You could tell he was working out, and then he had like a weightlifters or whatever body. So you saw that over the course of months. Same with Snuka. So Snuka was kind of doughy in 72, but yeah.
I don't remember him ever being out of shape. He was always in really amazing shape. Paul Orndorff is another guy. Paul Orndorff.
Perhaps those were head. You never know, because all those guys.
I wouldn't be surprised that those were a big part of it. Is that for you, Evan?
Yeah, it'll ring itself out.
Right. It happens with us every so often, but you know, usually for us it's for me it's always a telemarketer.
It's our those fanboys that listen to the show that are calling to say stop criticizing Trump.
Yeah.
You want to know something? I say this all the time. Having spent so much having spent so much time involved with wrestling, I'm used to guys like Trump. You know, these guys are basically salesmen and lowlifes, and Trump doesn't offend me as much as some of these like guys who sell out to the gun lobby, and I don't know. I'm not a fan, believe me. But
number two, Trump was never a gun guy, but now he's saying all this shit to get their vote. He's saying all this stuff to the evangelicals. Come on, Trump for decades said he was for abortion. He wanted to be able to party or do whatever he did with women and not have to worry about the consequences like Don Jr. or Eric. So that kind of reminded me. I thought of Trump when The Rock said last Friday on SmackDown to Cody that you were a mistake. You were born 20 years after the last born. You were a mistake. And I'm thinking, oh, Eric Trump.
And so what do you think of this build up to WrestleMania that's currently going on? I mean, I think it's one thing that the WWE is trying very hard to distract the public from like what's going on with Vince McMahon, who just sold $417 million worth of stock. I can hear it.
Evan say the machine has to roll on. They have to keep on going because who knows what's going to be happening in the cards for any of the McMahon family, and that would include Steph and Triple H. What's going to happen with them? But they have to go on. I would urge everybody to see Cody slap The Rock. That was a tremendous aftermath after what Rock said to Cody about being a quote unquote mistake, which is not true. Dusty simply got married to a new lady, very sweet woman too, and I think it's tremendous. They listen. Levesque, you got to say this about Triple H. He listens to the audience, and when they started in on this stuff, maybe championed by Dave LaGreca, the Cody Crybabies, they wanted Cody to finish his story. They altered it because originally it was just going to be straight on through. The main event of night 2 was going to be The Rock against Roman, and now they acquiesce. They listen to the fans. So give them some props for that.
Triple H, listen to this fan. Listen to this fan. Listen to this audience. You corporate vulture. How about putting Ivan Koloff in the WWE Hall of Fame? How about putting Ken Patera into the WWE Hall of Fame? How about stopping with this bullshit? How Roman Reigns is a better, longer champion than Pedro Morales and Hogan and all of these guys. He's knocking down all of these title reigns. When he sat at home, all of last year, the guy wrestled 11 matches. This is the new math. And next time you do the press scrum after one of your mediocre vanilla pay-per-views, premium live events, whatever you want to call it, and you boast about how much money you made, this is because you jacked up the price to obscene rates where the average working person can't afford to bring their wife and kids, okay? And finally, how about this? How about taking 1% or half of 1% of the billions and billions of dollars your company makes, you ruthless corporate vulture, and set up something where Billy Graham and Bushwhacker Butch and Virgil and basically, a huge long list of these guys need GoFundMes to be buried. How disgraceful. The NFL has a fund for their pioneers. Okay, I don't understand the awe and wonder for this Triple H. 80% of what he churns out is vanilla, mediocre, instantly forgettable. When was the last great WWE match? Rollins and Cody. That was the last, or Sheamus and Gunther. Okay, what was that? A year ago? These guys. It's just this mediocre product, and they put this guy on a pedestal. I don't get it. What I'm looking forward to is Ospreay and Danielson. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Preach. Yes, that collision, Russ. I got to urge. It's a tough watch. Maybe just tape it on a Saturday night because it really ruins, date night or whatever with your significant other. But that collision, I watched live as it was happening Saturday night, with the opener, Ospreay comes out. Hero's response, amazing. Okada in a 6-man, and you go on, or the opener was a Danielson kick-ass match where he got the shit slapped out of him, all red, his chest was bloody and all that stuff. It was an incredible 2 hours, and then it ends with the Ospreay Danielson, I think, that face-off. So the match is signed, quote unquote official. It was like the best hour of wrestling TV by any of the great companies out there, including TNA, MLW, etc., New Japan, which is saying something because New Japan's always terrific. And you don't have the predictability factor that Evan's talking about, where it's just like the guys are doing the same sequences in the same order.
AEW is still pretty predictable. You know it's going to win 8 out of 10 matches. I mean,
but it's worth it waiting for a Danielson match.
That match, though, is a dream match by anybody's standards. Ospreay, they've never, they have touched, but it was early in at least Ospreay's career. But that's going to be a dream match on another great pay-per-view.
And the thing is, the WWE has these great talents also, but they won't put them in the kind of matches that Nakamura or AJ Styles. They won't put them in great matches.
Nakamura's operating at 10% of what Nakamura could do if he was in AEW or back in home New Japan.
Right. They continue to poorly book this incredible talent. With better booking, and this is the part that I'm with Evan on, I don't see Triple H bringing that same kind of great ideas that he had when he was with NXT now to the WWE, and doing things that really turn the wrestling world on its ear. I mean, it's all stuff that seems like it's from the book of Vince, that he's taking
better than Vince, but not as good as it could be. And Tony Khan has a reverse problem. He's a matchmaker, as Bully Ray says, not a promoter, because he hasn't grown up in the business. He should reach out, maybe bring Arn Anderson back, have Dean Malenko help book. I mean, you have those talents there. You could even have Jake now. Thankfully, the DDP cleaned him up. He could contribute. You could have a booking team with these wrestlers and maybe not have Tony carrying this whole load upon himself. Doing everything, because again, he just does not have that wrestler's mindset because he's never been in a ring. Not that he's not, I mean, there's some great, hey, that card in the UK, Evan and I watched that together last year, whatever the thing was called.
All In.
Yeah, that was a hell of a show from
All
start
Out
to finish.
was better than All In a week later. Was.
But all of their pay-per-views are better than any of the stuff, in my opinion, that WWE is churning out. And hey, let me put over MLW, Court Bauer's promotion. That was an effing great show. I don't know, did you say you watched it?
Yeah, I saw it. That was excellent. Excellent. And TNA's been putting out good wrestling, very good wrestling for them.
But the problem is they got rid of Scott D'Amore. I heard because they thought he was spending too much on bringing in the talents. Towards the end, he had Will Ospreay dream matched with, what's his face, the guy from Montreal who's so awesome. Whatever his name is, but you know who I'm talking about. He was bringing in those guys before. Now they're going to be full-time. You're not going to see them even part-timer or per diems in TNA because they're signed with AEW. Although he's had Kushida. Kushida's always good for. They have excellent stuff. But Ev, your thoughts on Scott D'Amore? Because this guy was a genius. He was sort of like their Fit Finlay in terms of promoting women. Going back to the Kong and
Scott D'Amore on the previous pay-per-view, he does this heart-wrenching speech at the end of the show, and he's practically in tears about how TNA has come back from the abyss and blah blah blah. And it was great. I mean, you could see the guy loved that promotion with all his heart and gave his heart and soul to it. And I honestly don't know the backstage issues or why he was let go, but I just kind of cringed. I go, that's not the guy to let go. That's the guy who built them back up. I didn't get it. I didn't get it.
The corporate people and the guy put to replace him is just a TV guy, not a wrestling guy. And it was so weird because if you're going to let somebody go like that, wouldn't you like have them stick around for a week, a couple of weeks, a few days?
That's wrestling for you, though. I mean, boy, when you get the plug pulled on you.
He was done, and they didn't retain his services to like help with the transition. Nothing, which I think is a mistake, a big mistake.
Transitions in wrestling never happen. I mean, it's always the plug gets pulled and the guy is gone, and the storyline is completely cut off, and they move on to something else. That's the hallmark of wrestling.
Let me ask.
Cards subject to change.
Yes. Ev, have you? I think you physically have been to TNA shows since they started. Have you been to MLW show as well?
No, I've watched a few of their live pay-per-views, but I went to TNA shows live in New York, and I was disappointed every time. They weren't tremendous shows. I mean, you have one or two, very good matches. Nothing that was great, and again, a lot of talent. I went to one TNA show. They had like a 45-minute intermission where they're hawking merchandise, and it didn't really impress me that much. I'll tell you honestly, I've been to 3 AEW shows. I wasn't overly impressed live. I went to 2 at Arthur Ashe Stadium, and I went to World's End. The only match at World's End that was really worth seeing was Edge and Christian. I mean, there was nothing else on that card that warranted $36 to $479 a ticket. $36 to $479 a ticket.
And it was probably hard to find the $36 tickets. Those were probably
it's up in the nosebleeds. But I'm just saying, that's a significant amount of change to ask for fans for a show that.
Yeah, here in San Francisco, the minimum tickets for AEW were $75. That was the minimum. Nosebleeds.
Russ, have you gone to any AEW shows live?
No, I have not. And there's really only been like two shows here in the last like 8 or 9 years. There's not. We really are. Northern California is way underserved with places like MLW never does a show here. We never have TNA do a show here.
They haven't come out west.
Time for you to move.
WWE hasn't done a show here in a long time. No, I mean, really, it's what I do is I go to the indie shows because that's if you want to see wrestling on a frequent basis, you're waiting around for the WWE or AEW to do a show here in the Bay Area. My kids will be in college by the time they do another show out here.
Well, think about how much money you'll save on tickets if they're away in college.
I am. That's exactly it, too. Also, my kids don't care about wrestling.
Let me ask you guys both, Samoa Joe right now, good champion? He hasn't really had any matches since he won the title.
That 3-man match on the last pay-per-view was very disappointing. It didn't touch Swerve and Page Solo. Those were classics.
Yeah, you know what I think about 3-way matches? I always think they're disastrously, but it's the laziest booking you can get is a 3-way match, or the 8-way matches they have in AEW sometimes because they're so resplendent in talent. They just throw 8 guys into the ring and see.
And I was there. I was there for Samoa Joe and MJF at World's End, and MJF was hurt, so that was a nothing match. And until the guy has great matches, I'm not sold. He's done some great promos.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Samoa's a fantastic guy.
Yeah, but I'm a big fan of his, and the matches previous to his title reign were better matches.
And this run should have been probably for him like 4 or 5 years ago when he was in better shape and less injured, and
he's still excellent.
He's still a great wrestler, but he would have been a more dynamic champion, I think, 4 or 5 years ago instead of making the run now.
I'm with you.
I pull out my photos of him when he started. I think Evan's seen him, and Russ has probably seen him. This is before Russ came to APW when he was still at Rick Bassman's promotion down there in Irvine, California, in Orange County, Southern Cal. And he's like a quarter his size now.
So he did a dive out on me. So I would never be able to do a dive. I mean, the Samoa Joe of today, if he had done a dive out on me in 2000, turned me two-dimensional. I mean, that would have, I would have just been like when when the steamroller runs over you and you're just a flat, a flattened body. All my bones would have been crushed. So yeah, I would have never dive out.
With Soupy Sales, where in 1958 he gets run over by a train and then a cardboard Soupy, what do they call those flatheads? Like a flat Ronnie.
Oh, the fathead poster.
Yeah, that's what Soupy was the first to do that. And it was
done in cartoon.
Evan, I want to ask Evan about Soupy Sales.
And Soupy Sales was a genius. He was ahead of his time. Very funny guy. I met him. Nice guy, very down to earth.
He's a radio DJ after his TV, right in New York. He was on the station, and he used to give it to Stern, who was very rude to him. He was like a sort of a counterpart to Ernie Kovacs. Those two guys were the geniuses of the 50s in art.
This is what I'm talking about. A guy like Ernie Kovacs, you can't compare Jimmy Kimmel or the other Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon, it's totally vanilla what that guy does.
He is the worst suck up. He does a monologue where it's like 3 jokes, and you can tell he's uncomfortable with monologues. He does nothing. So my picks right now, Kimmel does the best monologue. Then Seth Meyers definitely is always funny. Colbert, who is just sort of just too vindictive. I think he's too obsessed with Trump being a piece of shit. He is. But Kimmel is way down. He should not have that show. He's degrading with Conan, Leno even, and definitely all that came before, Jack Paar, Carson. And Steve Allen, the first Tonight Show host, but when he'd take off in the summers, Ernie Kovacs was the Tonight Show host, so he was the second ever.
You can't compare these guys to Jack Paar either. The guy was brilliant, and Seth Meyers. I mean, he's an intelligent guy and he's funny, but he's certainly not hilarious. You put a guy like Chris Rock to host the Oscars. You put somebody with some edge to him.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Kimmel, that was his 4th appearance, and it was his least good, other than the Trump line, and a few things were funny. The John Cena coming out naked thing kind of bombed. It's a moment.
People are talking about it now. I mean, it is something people are talking about.
Talking about the fact there were 3 pro wrestlers together. When Cena came back, he had the robe around him, the draperies around him. He shakes hand with The Rock, and Bad Bunny, who is actually wrestled in big WWE pay-per-view matches, was there. There's 3 pro wrestlers on a show. So if they had Dave Bautista at all in the audience, you'd have 4 big, movie star-esque pro wrestlers all in one place. So that was a historic night for otherwise boring Oscars.
Well, now I do. Speaking of something that's boring, I do have a question for you guys as we're getting close to wrapping this up. Is there a match upcoming in WrestleMania that you guys are really looking forward to other than the main event?
The tag should be fun with Seth and Cody against Roman and The Rock. That could be fun. That's the main event.
Part of the main event, though. I consider that.
Oh, that's the event of night 1. Night 2 is going to be Cody, and the Bloodline will all be there interfering, and he's going to go over Roman at that point.
But any of the other matches that have been announced, do they excite you at all or move the needle at all, in your opinion?
It's Becky against Rhea Ripley. That should be a banger match. Hopefully, if they let them go.
I wouldn't pay $25 to see Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre at the Garden. These guys have been around forever. It's
I mean, I think WrestleMania, for considering it's going to be 8 hours long, you're going to have 5 hours one day and 3 hours the next.
Oh, so they're not having that McIntyre match, right?
Oh, no, they're not doing it. But I think you're right. Evan's right. They're having it night 2 when Cody gets the singles with Roman.
Oh, they are. I don't watch their TV at all, so I basically just watch the premium live events. That's it. I can't talk. I've lost enough brain cells at my age. I can't watch WWE TV. It's deadly.
Yeah, well, I just think for WrestleMania, I think it's the other matches that they're using to fill in feel to me like stuff that you'd normally see on a Raw or SmackDown. There's nothing
there is nothing on either night's one or night two that's going to compare to and Nigel's supposed to be coming out with Ospreay against Danielson. So I'm looking more forward to that match, Ospreay-Danielson, than both nights of WrestleMania.
But I think it almost doesn't matter to that fan base because then they're not particularly interested in great matches. They want to sing along. They like the entrances. They like the pageantry. It's really Money Mark Mania when, it's like a religious fervor when they hop on planes and spend thousands of dollars to see a wrestling show.
It's a cult, Evan, right? It's somewhat like a cult.
It's Money Mark Mania running wild for 2 days.
Mark Mania. And it's sort of like the Trump people. That's a cult because they're overlooking all of these faults, which is like if you're a normal person, you see this guy, lock the fucker up. But they are similar to some of the cultist WWE fans where it's all about everything but the actual in-ring that's so predictable, as Evan has eloquently said, the entrance, the singing, the robe, whatever girls are going to have, they're going to have a bunch of Bianca lookalikes, which is great, but you got to have some meat in the match. Like, who is Bianca even? I think she's facing Io. No, it's going to be Bayley is against Io Sky, which could be good. The women's matches probably are going to outshine the guys.
I know. We're getting to that point now too, where women's matches are. I'm looking forward to them more than I am the men's matches because of the.
I still think the best women's act, the best women's gimmick is Toni Storm in AEW.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best matches, but the best gimmick by far.
Gloria Swanson from Sunset Boulevard is how that character started. It is brilliant every week. It's the highlight of AEW's Toni Storm. It really is. And now she's taking Marissa May, who comes out looking exactly like the old Toni Storm with the baseball hat. All she needs is a little black football eyeliner under that eye.
That's pretty funny. So anyway, guys, we're just about at the end of the hour. You guys want to talk about any projects that you're working on?
Yeah, please, everybody check out Evan Ginsberg's Old School Wrestling Memories on Facebook. Check out Wrestling Then and Now, the documentary, Killer Kowalski, Nikolai, Homicide. Check out 350 Days, ProWrestlingStories.com. I'm the senior editor. And I would like to congratulate Mike on his upcoming tour with Donald Trump. You can see he's a tremendous fan, and yeah.
Running for vice president there.
You're
going to be working on the Steve Garvey campaign, aren't you?
What a moron! People that are not career politicians don't go for a big Senate race. Go for a dinky, lowest level thing and see if you can get elected and do a good job there first. Don't go for that when you've been a baseball player all your life and you have absolutely zero political experience, a la his hero Trump. No effing way. Ridiculous. And of course, they're taking him. Schiff is taking him to task for being a Trump loyalist and all the other bullshit. How can you not look at this guy and say, lock him up, lock him up? Forget about the Hillary bullshit. Or
maybe one of the 91 other charges that he has against him will finally stick, and we'll see Trump actually do the time he deserves.
You know what he did? In no one-term president were they able to put 3 people on the Supreme Court. So you got to give some shit to the legend Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Why she didn't go out and let Obama appoint somebody. This Trump has 3 people. He has stacked the deck. Those morons that he has, the 4 meaning morons are going to always go his way, and it's sick.
All right, fans, stay tuned for the We Can't Stand Trump Hour with me and Mike. We'll just continue this on for another hour where we'll talk about how much we hate Trump. But until then, let's see everybody else.
I am recommending Iron Claw. Despite the flaws, I think people still should see it, whether you're a casual or you're a historic whatever, a long timer. It's still worth seeing because we don't get that many wrestling movies. The last one I think was that Jake Roberts one that he was in. It was pretty good. The Peanut Butter Falcon.
That was awesome.
Peanut Butter Falcon was great. The rest
And
of
also there was the there was also the transvestite wrestler, the
not transvestite. Yeah, that was good. Finally watched that. But hey, if you really want to see something fun, go check out. Well, Paradise Alley is a classic with tons of wrestlers in it. My one and only, the Henry Winkler as Gorgeous George. That one had all kinds of guys like Piper and Chavo, etc. in that one. And
the Wrestler again. If you want to see a film that really deserved an Academy Award, see The Wrestler.
Best pro wrestling movie ever of all time, including Alias the Champ, 1947 film with Gorgeous George.
All right,
so
guys.
The wrestler Rourke that Evan did everything on wrestling wise. That's the all-time best, hands down. No argument there.
There you go. All right, guys. We got to get going, but it's good to see you this week, and we'll see you guys again soon.
Have a good Trump.
Yes.